My name is Guru Raghavendra. I am mostly into the software engineering world. I've been in that industry for about 20 years. My hobby, or rather my interest that keeps me going in life, is about learning about financial education and educating myself in the financial world. And that's how I ran into this book called Buy This, Not That. Um, and Kunal and I are reviewing this book. And
So what really got you into finance, Guru? Is it your family, your genes, or like what got you into finance?
I come from a modest background. I'm from India, and with having seen the struggle initially in my younger years, I decided, you know what, I'll try and change this for me and for my family. So that's what drives me. Yeah, it drives
Ah,
me.
that's interesting. To come if you've seen struggle, then you really appreciate it and you want to solve it. And yeah, I'm also in technology sector, work at LinkedIn, and I'm interested in learning. And Guru was sharing with me this fantastic book, and we really felt this was a great idea for us to start sharing and having these sessions. So it's just our time to get together,
Yeah,
have fun, learn from each other, and then share this journey with all of you
yeah.
listeners. This book is all about personal finance. Is that how you see it too? What do you feel? What's your
I, yes, it is mostly about personal finance, but he has bits of life lessons as well, which we can speak when we speak. I think the audience will connect to. Yes, it's mostly about personal finance and how to win the rat race, if I can call that. How to get ahead when you still have much of life left, when you're still younger, relatively.
That's right. I think even if there's a saying that says if you win the rat race, you're still a rat at the end of it. Um,
A rich and comfortable rat. I don't
Rich
mind
and
being that.
comfortable rat. So that's while we have the time, we can make some wise decisions and learn from the author. He's written
Yeah,
this fantastic blog for like
yeah,
30 plus years, Financial Samurai.
yeah.
And
Yes,
so this
yes.
is this is going to be an interesting journey where
Yep.
we learn how to maximize our earnings, maximize our savings, maximize
Where to
investment.
invest for the
Exactly.
best returns, how to be
Yep.
smart about life, what do you do with money, why do you do that with money, and a lot of things. And how to negotiate a package when you exit a company. I have never read that in any other book.
Yep.
An
It's
author
very
speaking
structured.
of how to get fired.
How to get fired.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, yeah. That's pretty bold.
Yeah. I feel the biggest thing that I liked in the intro was when he shared that a lot of people don't take action because
Yeah,
the choices are too many in finance, like with life,
yeah,
like with
yeah,
everything in life. It's
yeah,
just that the number of choices are too many,
yeah.
and it makes it very hard for people to decide what to
Yeah.
do. And I felt that
Yes.
there's going to be a lot of value that this book can add if we can
Absolutely.
get some clarity and framework and some structured way to think about finances. And it's a huge topic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to money, it's not that we don't want to do something about it. We don't know how to do anything about it. So that's why we try to, turn a blind eye towards it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. So yeah, let's jump in. And we will share with the listener whatever experiences we've had going through this and our
Yeah.
journey, and as a process we get better and share the learnings with the
Yeah.
audience. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start with the first chapter, Kunal. If I can ask you, the title of the first chapter is Find Your Happiness Equation. I think that's the first thing. It's the right chapter to start with, right? So, what were a few things that you took from this chapter, if you were to summarize this in a brief way?
It's very interesting because the author starts with not find your financial equation or how much money you want to make as the title, but he starts with happiness, right? So
Hmm.
and that was quite deep when I read title. I'm like, oh wow,
Mm.
this is huge. And even he shared some examples around happiness equals reality minus expectations. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that's
Yeah.
for an engineer in me, I loved that. Which is like, okay, I can mathematically optimize for this equation,
Yeah.
increase, my increase the reality that I have, and gratefulness about the reality, and reduce the expectations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was quite curious when I read this to say, hey, I'm going to go deep, not just with finance, but also reflect on
Yeah.
how and what and where, what I need to do, with whom do I need to do, and, what is happiness for me. So I paused and reflect a little bit, and it all came down to control.
Uh-huh.
One word, control. Like if I could control my situation, right? Like where I work, how much time I work,
Mm-hmm.
and what kind of work I do, when do I do it, right? And with who do I
Mm-hmm.
work? These all, like, if I have control over
Yeah.
each of these things, then that would be amazing. So that is what
Yeah.
helped me with, like, this one word of control, of, or like, how do I get to that stage where I can control things? And I see a lot of really successful people, like, um and most of them are rich, so they are able to control what they do. Like, let's say Warren Buffett, right? He's able to really control who he works with. He has the fortune to uh, buy and invest wherever he wants to invest, right? And he also, luckily, drinking all the coke that he drinks, he's also luckily very healthy. So look at the amount of things working well for him at his age.
Right.
And
Right.
so I feel that was the biggest takeaway for me, which is like, how do I set goals, and so that I can reach to this level of control where
Yeah.
I can actually be more happy, and
Yeah.
he gives some examples around saving enough money that's equal to 20 times your annual average income, which was really
Yeah.
helpful. I'm like, okay, now you gave me the first equation, but now give me some more equations. And that was like,
Yeah.
okay, wow, okay, that's a good way. And he explains how, that makes sense. And I highly recommend reading the chapter for the other listeners, because
Yeah.
it's good. It's a good framework. Every
Yeah.
chapter, every topic is about structured thinking, breaking it down, and actually
Yeah.
making it easy. So that
Yeah.
was my biggest takeaway of setting a goal or a true north with enough level of control that I can have. What did you feel about this? Anything intriguing you want
Yeah.
to share?
There's an example of him asking the reader to put in the real life expenses to get a hang of how much you spend and how much you need for the retirement or to be financially free, right? So I do this in a crude way in a spreadsheet, but looking at his example, I think that was pretty good in the book. And I start to put down some of what I spend on, and to just get an idea of how much we need as a family if I were to do 25 times the expenses or 20 times the average income, right? So how much I would need to maintain that quality of life, standard of living. That's one thing. And another thing that he spoke about is when you are financially free, your health definitely improves. That's one example, prime example you took of the great Warren Buffett, that he drinks a Coke every day, but he never talks about the sugar levels being high or he being diabetic, or it doesn't matter. He's happy, I guess. He burns off all the calories in a good way. So, yep,
Yep.
financially free definitely gives you a lot of strength
Yeah.
mentally and physically.
That's a
Yeah,
great point you mentioned, and I wanted to double emphasize that, which is, you said, you know, you could have all the money in the world, but if you're not healthy,
what
or
would you do?
what's the use of all of that? Right? So a
Absolutely.
great
That's
point
why
you mentioned there as
that's
well.
what the author calls out, like, what is your happiness equation, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's we'll talk a little bit more on this happiness equation in chapter two,
Yep.
and
So
some
let's get into
examples.
that. Yeah. So chapter
Yep.
two, It's the title is "Do the Math and the Plan Will Come."
Absolutely.
What was your key insight that you found most moving on this?
Um, do the math. He basically talks about, put the pen to the paper and write down your expenses, but and what's your savings rate, and what do you want, what are you going to do with all that money when you do achieve that, right? For example, tie all your income to specific goals, and purpose, right? Um, invest in Tesla. Why do I want to invest in Tesla? What are you going to get out of it 5 years from now? When Tesla does better, I'm just taking a random example. Maybe Tesla does better or not. Let's assume it reaches the all-time high, and then you did get 2x, 3x, 4x, or whatever amount of money. What would you do with that, right? Write it down. Would that be your down payment for a new home or another car? Or does that pay for your kids' college tuition? Right? So just write it down. Just writing it down helps you understand, like, okay, this investment is going towards this goal. Right? I liked that. Um, and he also talks about, like you said, again, have a net worth target of 20 times your average annual income or 25 times your expenses. Personally, for me, I think 25 times the expenses is less daunting than 20 times the average income is like, oh my God, forget about this. I don't know when I'm going to reach that, right? Because at least I think this is a good way, and everybody among your audiences will also connect with this. Your average income keeps going up year on year, until certain age, right? And 20 times that is like huge, right? So 25 times the expenses is something that I am aiming for. If we reached the middle ground, that's great. It'll still be a win-win situation. Um, and in this chapter, the name is very, very apt, because do the math and the plan will come in the sense that you need to understand how much you can safely withdraw from your nest egg. And he also has an equation for that. For example, like that's the math he's talking about. You can there was this
And when you
fire.
say, sorry, when you say for the listener, when you say withdraw, what do you mean by withdraw? Is this about retirement or what do you talk? What is this? What
Yeah,
is the, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
retirement. So let's say you do reach the goal of 25 times your annual expenses, right? Now you can theoretically stop working, right? Personally, it would be boring to stop working, but anyway, you can stop working. Now, how much do you withdraw per year out of your nest egg, right? The traditional um, information out there, at least from what I've read on the internet, is from the FIRE movement. What's that FIRE stand for? Financially independent, retire early, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so that's like 4% out of your nest egg every year. But then the author differs from that, and he says that no, you got to withdraw 80% of the 10-year treasury yield. And I thought, yeah, I've never read this anywhere. And it takes the ups and downs of the economic cycle and how your portfolio does accordingly, right? The treasury yield also goes up and down corresponding to the economic cycle. So if you just stick to that 80% of your treasury, the 10-year treasury yield, that's a safe withdrawal amount. That's something, another math that he did and showed in the chapter 2 that I really liked. Um, and yeah, a couple of things that if I had to summarize chapter 2, yeah.
Yeah. Again, another equation and a structured way of thinking about,
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
how much
Yeah,
money is enough? And he put a number down, as you said, this equation of 80% of 10-year treasury yield. I think this whole 4% rule came into existence as I read that chapter, was when the inflation and the 10-year treasury yield was around 7% at that time. And
yeah,
so,
yeah.
and then, that, as we know, over the last 12 years, the treasury yield has gone down to close to zero.
Calm
Now it's
down.
going back
Yeah,
up.
Yeah.
But what he's saying is don't just take the 4% rule as is, just
Yeah.
use the equation as you shared,
Yeah.
80% or some percent of treasury yield, right? So you have
Yeah.
margin of safety. It's all basically, if you put all that money in treasury, government treasuries, you can still make enough and not have to worry about your expense, right? So that was huge.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
structured way to think about this, which was,
Absolutely.
okay,
Absolutely.
make
Yeah.
it math, make it easy for me.
Yeah, and
So,
I should mention another point that I took from this chapter is what's your risk tolerance in terms of age? Like, let's say you invested X amount of money in the market and then you lost, like say 2022 was a bad year. A lot of people lost money. Now, how many years are you willing to put to earn that money, either from the markets or from your regular income? That's your risk tolerance. Without giving away much for the readers to read from the book, he does put in a table where he talks about, okay, if you lost about $10,000, would you work 1 year to get that money? Or would you spend 5 years to get that money? Where is your risk tolerance? How many years are you willing to put in to earn that much money? So if you're not willing to put more than few months, then your risk tolerance is low. If you are going to work many years and if you're young, to gain that money back, then obviously your risk tolerance is high, right? To give an example, I that was a pretty good point that he called out because
yeah,
when people say, "What's your risk tolerance?" Like how do I quantify this, right? Right? So you don't know what's my risk tolerance, 100%, 10%, is it even percent or is it in years? Who knows? Like this was pretty good that the author puts it in a number of
yeah.
years.
I think
What's your risk
when I
tolerance?
was asked about risk tolerance, I was like, what are my options? And then they were like, oh,
Yeah,
it could be, and then I was like, oh, I'm the most aggressive, And then when I read this equation,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
that's not true anymore because it
yeah,
basically ties risk tolerance to how much time are
yeah.
you willing to go back
Yep.
to work to
Yes.
recoup that money. So again,
Recoup the money.
fantastic
Yep.
equation and say, hey, make it quantifiable. But yeah,
Quantifiable.
thanks
Yeah.
for bringing that up as well. That was a huge
Yeah.
insight. Quite
Yes.
novel way of thinking about risk tolerance and something that
Yeah.
people can maybe more objectively talk about rather than, oh, I'm aggressive, I'm conservative, I'm
Yeah. It's
what
very
does that even
open-ended,
mean?
right?
you
It's
know,
open-ended. Like if you cannot measure it, how will you manage it, right? So
exactly.
if I can
Yeah.
measure it in terms of years, now I know how to manage it. So that was a good takeaway from chapter 2. Now,
Yep.
jumping to chapter 3, the title is Get the Cash and Put It to Work. Right now, let's say, yeah, we are all making money now. How do we put it to work? If you were to summarize or highlight few points from this chapter, Kunal, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me was if I don't make my money work for me,
Hmm.
I'm missing out. That's the
Yeah,
one liner, right? Which is,
yeah.
and actually, when I read this, I realized that there was lots of money parked in various instruments, like savings account, checking
Hmm.
account, which I had even then uh,
Uh-huh.
not thought about, is it working hard for me? And I realized
Hmm.
quickly that this is not the best use of my money. I should
Hmm.
probably leverage the fact that the Federal Reserve is hiking up rates, and I
Hmm.
should have an instrument like money markets and others,
Yeah,
which could benefit instantly. Like on the same,
yeah.
when the Federal Reserve increases the, I think they call it the reverse repo rate, right?
Hmm.
And the federal funds rate. So I had significant change that I moved all my money that was just
Yeah.
sitting in my
Checkings.
0.0x% checking and savings account to a 4% account
Money
instantly,
market.
and that was
Yeah,
huge.
yeah,
So
yeah.
basically, this chapter made me think, is my money working for me? And not just in terms of where it is parked, but also,
Yeah.
am I using all the legal advantages that I have by maxing out my
Tax
pre-tax
saving. Yeah.
tax savings
Tax
accounts,
advantage. Yeah.
tax advantaged accounts, and all of that?
Yep.
And we can invest a lot of money that we should be investing. So
Yeah.
I was already doing most of that, but that was huge, which is how do you um, get the right investments that
Yep.
work for you. So I just talked about parking the money in one sense, but
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I took away that was again an equation
Yeah.
was he breaks down different types of passive investments in
Uh-huh.
by by various dimensions. Like, hey,
Gives a
uh,
scorecard.
yeah, he gives a whole scorecard. And so I'd
Yeah.
highly recommend folks, if you're listening in and if you like this, you should go get the book. But in a
Yep.
sense, he says, hey, every passive investment is different,
Uh-huh.
but each of these have like different level of risk. Each of
Uh-huh.
them have different level of work required in terms
Yep.
of keeping that asset productive. Each of them may have various liquidity preferences, which is like you can't just on with a click say, hey, my real estate, I'm selling that right now and at this
Yeah.
price,
Exactly.
and so there's
Exactly.
and there's tax implications, and and so he comes up with an equation to score all,
Yeah.
like he comes up with like six different types of passive investments, and he says
Yeah.
he comes up with a score. I don't agree with most of these scores, but I
Hmm.
like the framework that he came up with. And there's so many better ways to make passive investment, and so
Yeah.
many ways that this whole thing made me think, which is how do I
Yeah.
systematically break it down as to say, hey, what passive investment is really good for me? And
Yeah.
everyone has a different preference. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I can spend a few hours on the weekend and that's good for me. So maybe I should create a blog, or maybe I
Yeah.
should create a content. That works for me. But I
Absolutely.
can't like, you know, deal with, like, let's say repairs in the middle of America because I have a rental property there. No, I
Hmm.
can't, because
Hmm.
I'm not competent. So that was the key thing: is my money working for me? And second, where am I keeping my money, and what kind of passive investments are good for me? It gave
Hmm.
me a structured way to think about, like an equation. Say, hey, break this down into these different dimensions, and realize that passive investments take time to build. Right, that was the
Yeah.
final point, which is you can't expect
Yep.
to start making money, let's say even on a YouTube channel, in less than a year.
Yeah.
It's going
Yeah.
to be massive amount of effort, so you'd have to think long term, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, to say, hey, I'm going to start, I'm going to contribute, create value, and offer value enough that I get returns. So yeah, that was the key takeaway. I found out, again, a structured way to think about problems, and it inspired me to Google various types of passive investments. And there's a
Yeah.
really good, I'll put it in the description of this video, a link to a channel that I liked about passive investments. So yeah, that was good. Anything you found that I missed, that you found was more
No,
interesting?
I think you summarized it well. And when you read about all these passive investments, I personally felt like, oh my God, I didn't do anything. Can I quickly catch up? Is there a way to get rich quick? This is not it, right? And he also talks about like it may take from anywhere from 10 to 30 years to generate the passive income to meet your lifestyle expenses. So this is really a long-term plan. And I
Yeah,
think this is what is foolproof. Any other methods are really hit or miss.
yeah,
And then, yeah, yeah,
agreed. There is no like get rich quick scheme that is legal,
yeah.
or is actually true. If
It's
you
actually practical.
exactly, yeah.
It's
So
a
that
bubble.
was chapter 3, right? And then the last chapter of this part, chapter 4, mastering your debt. So Guru, you want to take it away? Tell us.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, you know what? When I went to Barnes and Nobles to pick up this book, I did not plan to pick up this book. I was just browsing through, and then I happened to just open the book, and I ran into this chapter. And this was the page that I first looked at, and it spoke about master your debt. Like, you know what? Wow, let's see what this author is talking about. What are the kinds of debt? He talks about the worst and the least worst. There is no best here. Um, you can, for example, let's say he says Credit card debt is the worst. I agree with the kind of interest rates the banks charge, right? It's I think in 20% or something like that. That's just crazy. Followed by the auto loans. I slightly differ there. I like cars. If it makes you happy, go buy a car. And then with that happiness, I think it'll lead to something else. You'll be more productive. Like don't buy a Ferrari. Yeah, if you like something else, yeah, something in your range, go buy it. Student loans. I personally had a student loan I took for my Haas MBA. And that was variable rate, and it's the horrible. It's the worst part that can happen to you is because when the Fed is raising interest every month, your student loan rates also go up. So that's the third worst, and the least worst is the mortgage loans, which he he's not completely the author. When I say he is not completely against it, because it will help you build these assets, right? These real estate. So I think he talks about, okay, if you are really going to put this to work, then yes, he supports out of all these debts, he supports the mortgage debt. But all the three, he's like, no, you got to get rid of this. Um, yeah, and then he talks about a formula again. Again, this author is great in quantifying things. Um, like how much should you pay from your free cash flow, from your income after the expenses? Not after the expenses, before expenses. Some of your free cash flow, how much do you pay? Like, for example, he puts a percentage depending on the interest rates of your loan. Let's say 4% interest rate multiplied by 10. That means 40% of your free cash flow that you bring home should go towards that loan, right? Anything about 10% is obviously 100% of your free cash flow should go into that. But again, you can't pay 100% and then live with nothing. So you got to balance that out. But I like that. And I was thinking at some point my student loan was about 8%. So I was thinking, oh, at that point, I should have been paying 80% of my, let's say, not even free cash flow. Okay, maybe savings, right? After all the expenses, 80% of my savings should go into my loans, and 20% should go into investments, right? So that was pretty good. I have never read this formula anywhere else on the internet or any other books.
Wow.
That was one takeaway, definitely.
Did you actually
Uh,
make any real life change with that 8% that you had, or
it
were you?
it motivated me so much that I ended up closing my student loan in like 2 months. I I I put my hands into my savings, and I'm like, no, I just want to get rid of this because 8% every month, I pay the monthly due, and most of it goes to the interest, and that's very disheartening. So like, I'm going to get rid of the student loan.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like, what part in that really motivated you to pay it off, early? He gave us an equation for sure, but like that was true before as well, right? Like,
yeah.
same was going to interest before, same was going to interest after. But like, what within that formula, or like what helped you say, hey, I'm done with this?
Not just that formula. He talks about, that's a great segue to our next point that I was going to talk about is he talks about what should be your asset to liability ratio. He gives a 10:1 is a good asset to liability ratio, and my goal is to reach that. And my motivation to close my student loan was that to reach that 10:1 asset to liability ratio is one step closer to that ratio is why I just closed my student loan. And my next aim is to close my auto loan, which is very cheap, Kunal, at 1% per annum is a steal deal. But going by after having read this book, I want to get rid of all the liabilities and try to bring that ratios to 10:1.
But the
So
more I
yeah.
think about it, um, if you're getting free money at 4%,
Mm-hmm.
why would you pay off the 1% auto loan faster? You would actually not, right?
It's the lighter your baggage is, the
Mm,
sooner you'll reach that retirement goal.
I
Because
see.
there's no end to this. There's always going to be cheap money. That means you'll always get tempted to buy some depreciating assets just because the money is cheap.
Yep.
You will do the calculation, you start convincing yourselves, right? Inflation is at 7%. The auto loan I'm getting is 4%. Net net, you know what? I'm gaining 3%. No, you're not. That
Yep.
asset is depreciating. You're losing money. So why don't you just get rid of all the debt? And
I see.
with the money that comes in, savings, you can make it grow at a
Yeah,
higher rate, right? So that's one of the motivations. But again,
it's a great
talking
point.
is so easy.
It's a great point. You bring up a really
Yeah,
good point, which is if we thought about it this way, and we would use that extra money lying around and
yeah,
maybe make blunders instead of reducing that debt. And
yeah.
basically, debt is an obligation.
100% return.
Yeah, basically a debt. When you have debt, it basically you are expected to work. You
Yep,
don't have an option.
yep,
so so your
yep.
point is really valid. Like, why have that burden
I,
and then
yeah,
speculate into investments potentially that can take down assets further. So huge. That's a great point. I
yeah,
fully
yeah.
agree with
Yeah.
that point.
Uh, I was going to say, when I said 100% return is when you pay off your debt, that's 100% return, right? You don't have to pay any more debt. So,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
Even this
Yeah,
whole
something else. Uh-huh.
car equation, right? Like, and I know you don't agree with that. So can you tell me a little bit more? Like, what do you not agree with this whole car? I know, agreed. Everyone, like everyone's listening. We all agree that credit card debt absolutely is like poison. So you should just pay full amount, get it. We will continue again in the next part, which is putting your money to work. Yeah,
Yep, yep.
cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah.